Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Cooper, and I'm so excited for today's episode. If you're watching this when the episode first comes out, then I will actually be in the Dominican Republic. I'm going on a mission trip for a week in the Dominican Republic, and I am so excited. I am just so grateful for all the support that I've gotten for it. I've had a lot of people make donations to me, a lot of prayers, and so much support, and I'm just so grateful for all of it. I'm so blessed to have the opportunity to go again. I was able to go last year, and this is my second year going, and I'm just so excited. I know that I'm gonna get to see a lot of things that we don't see here and get to see God working, and I'm so excited. And it's something that, it's very outside of my comfort zone to do things like this and to, go out. And I'm not really going with any friends. It's just me. And I'm going with my church, of course. I'm not going like by myself, but I don't really have any close friends going with me or anything. So it's, you know, I'm doing it and it's hard, but I'm super excited. And with that being said, today's episode is going to be about doing things that are not comfortable. This episode was inspired by my mission trip, but I think that God didn't create us to be comfortable. He didn't create us to live comfortable lives. And that's not saying that he finds pleasure in us being uncomfortable or anything like that. It's just saying I don't think our short lives here, I don't think we're meant to only do things that make us comfortable. I think we're meant for more than that. And I think it's so important to put ourselves out there and do things that are hard and that scare us. Because if we don't, how are we ever going to grow? How are we ever going to become the people who we want to be? You have to do things that are hard sometimes. And I think that I've always been kind of a quiet kid. I've been the very introverted one. I don't really talk to a lot of people. I don't, do things like that are really far out there. But I think over the past couple of years, I'd say I've been getting better at doing things that are putting myself out there. I'm getting better at, doing things that maybe aren't comfortable in the moment, but I think even when they're not comfortable in the moment, they're worth it in the end because you grow or you learn something about yourself, you learn something about others. It's so important, and I think I've been able to grow so much over the past couple of years because of, the risks that I've taken, because of the things that I've done that are not necessarily fun in the moment or exciting for me. They're scary. They push me towards the person I want to be. And yeah, we have to be always doing things outside of our comfort zones. Also, not only do we need to be doing that, but also it's just not fun to always be comfortable. Like, what would be the point of life if all we did was whatever's comfortable to us all the time? Instead of doing that workout that's hard for you, you just sit on your couch. The couch is comfortable. I'll just sit here for the rest of the day. It's like, no, we need to get out. We need to do hard things. The hard things push us. The hard things shape us. And I think it can be applied to, many aspects of your life. I think, for me, it can sometimes be doing uncomfortable things socially. Maybe talking to someone who I'm not super close with at an event instead of just hanging out with the one person I know the whole time. Maybe it's going out of my way to introduce myself to someone new that I didn't know before. Those things are hard for me, but that's still doing something that's uncomfortable. That's still pushing myself beyond my limits, and that's important. I think it can be, applied spiritually as well. It's sometimes uncomfortable to talk about your faith with someone, but sometimes that's needed. Sometimes you need to put yourself out there and put your experiences out there and be uncomfortable for a second because you don't know how much that could help someone else. Even with, this podcast, I've never really done anything like this before. I've never put myself out there like I am now. But I believe that it's worth it because of the people who are able to listen and benefit from it. And for that reason, that's why I keep doing these. That's why I keep filming episodes every week, because me being uncomfortable for short amounts of times or saying things that I don't normally talk about. It's benefiting others, and it's also benefiting me because I'm growing along the way. I'm learning things about myself. I'm learning to put myself out there. I'm learning to speak clearly and, feel my emotions. And you guys are able to listen. You're able to learn from my experiences, maybe relate in some way. And we're both growing. And that is so important. It can be applied in the physical form, Sometimes we have to do hard things physically. Maybe you're going on a hike with your family and it's a really long hike and you're uncomfortable, you're sweating and your clothes are sticking to you and it's uncomfortable, but you keep going. And then at the end, you feel accomplished. You feel like you did something that was worth something. And not only that, but you created memories with your family or your friends who you went with, whatever it is. It's like sometimes pushing yourself beyond the limits that we create is so important. I think in so many cases, especially with me, I've seen this so many times in my own life. Like, we are our own worst enemy. Our brains convince us that we can't do things. Especially as someone who has dealt with, anxiety, I don't like the idea of going and talking to someone new. I don't like that. I feel anxious about doing that. And my brain tells me, no, they won't like you. You shouldn't do that. Don't put yourself out there. Don't do this thing. But whenever I take the steps and do it anyways, I see so much growth. I see so much benefit from it. The same thing physically. When I do hard things, my brain tells me, no, you can't do it. This is your limit. You can't go any farther than this. You can't go any harder than this. But then I do it. Do it anyways. Do it even when you're scared. Do it even when you're anxious about it, because you never know how God can use that in your life. You never know how God can use all of these things to push you towards the person you are meant to become. Truly. I mean, God is with you all the time. And I think that's given me hope to do hard things, because no matter what I'm doing, I know that God is in my corner and He is right there alongside me. He's never going to leave me to just do it all on my own. He's right there beside me, and you need to remember that too. Like, you're not going through it alone. You have someone who's cheering you on through the uncomfortable times, through the dark times. And I think those uncomfortable, frightening, dark times are what change us in so many ways. If we lived these comfortable lives all the time, it's like we would never grow, ever. I mean, in what way would you be able to grow if you weren't doing anything outside of your comfort zone? Our brains create these limits for ourselves, but Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Even when your brain tells you that you can't, you can, because God gives you the ability to do those things. God gave us bodies that are able to do hard things. He gave us minds that are able to do hard things. So do it. Do it even when it's uncomfortable. I wanted to talk about a few things in my life that I have done that are uncomfortable, and these are all in kind of different realms, I guess, but I wanted to emphasize the ways that I've done this in my own life, and maybe you guys can find things in your life that have been uncomfortable for you, but you've grown from them, or maybe give you an idea of uncomfortable things you can do. Push yourself beyond the limits. Don't let your brain create these limits for you, because your brain will set these limits nowhere near your potential and your actual ability. So my first one, this one is the physical aspect, but something very hard that I did with my dad just a few weeks ago was this Ragnar race. If you've ever been to Texas, you know there's not high elevation here. It's also very hot weather, especially in the summers. So I'm used to 95 degrees. I'm not used to cold weather. I'm not used to altitude. I'm not used to mountains, anything like that. But me and my dad went and we ran this race in Oregon. And every single run we did, because there's 3 runs in the race for each person. But each run had this huge climb up this mountain. I had never done something like that before. I had never experienced a challenge like that before, and it was hard. It was really hard, and I had to push myself beyond what my brain told me that I could do. I was running my last run. The 3 runs that we had, one of the runs was 3 miles, one was 5 miles, and one was 7 miles. I was on my last run, and my last run was the longest one. It was 7 miles, and my brain just kept saying, "You can't do this. You're not gonna make it back. You can't do this." But I did it anyways. You know, all of those negative thoughts that were crowding my brain, I could have stopped. I could have just walked the rest away, but I didn't. That's resilience. That's pushing myself beyond what my brain tells me. And those are the things that I want to keep doing because they grow me. They make me grow. They force me to do uncomfortable things. But after I finished that race, I felt so accomplished. I felt honestly more accomplished than almost anything else I've ever done in my life. I'm only 17, so I haven't done, that many things physically, but, it was still, I felt so accomplished and I felt so proud of myself for pushing myself. And that's the reward of doing hard things physically. You feel accomplished. You can be proud of yourself for doing hard things. It's important. I have runs sometimes and workouts where I am just like, this is horrible. I can't go any farther. But ultimately, when you do go farther, even when your legs are tired, even when your lungs are finding it difficult to breathe, like you will feel accomplished afterward. Do it anyways. That is going to be the title of this episode. Do it anyways. Do it even when it's hard. Do it when you're scared. Do it when you don't even know if it's possible. Do it anyways because you never know what you're truly capable of unless you go for it. You have to go for it. The next one I touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but my mission trip to the Dominican Republic. It's scary. I'm only 17, but I'm going without my parents to another country, It's scary to do things like that. It's scary to not know about these things. I don't know everything that we're going to be doing. Each year they do a little bit different of things, but I'm scared, but I'm also excited. And I want to keep doing things like this. I want to keep, learning because ultimately, me going on this trip, yes, I'm scared. And this morning I had, this feeling of like just nervousness. I'm just nervous about what if I don't make friends? What if I'm lonely while I'm there? Things like that. But the reward of it is I get to see what people's lives are like in other countries. I get to, have gratitude for the life I live here. I get to come back with a whole new perspective of the world. Like, you don't get those things often, so I don't want to overlook them. These things are important. I want to experience things like this so that I can understand the world better and I can be just that much more grateful for my own life, for where I'm at right now. And one thing I wanted to touch on before I move on to the next thing is I think that when you are getting close to God, when you are living your life walking in line with what God wants you to do, I think that is when the enemy will try to strike the hardest. I think that's when the enemy will start to come after you because ultimately the enemy's goal is to not let you go to heaven, to not let you get that close to God. He wants to pull you back in any way he can, and he doesn't need to pull people back who are not in alignment with God anyways, because they aren't going to go to heaven anyways. So the enemy doesn't need to do anything to work on them. But when you are doing the things that God wants you to do, the enemy is threatened. So he wants to stop that in any way he can. And I think that's why he strikes in those times. I'm leaving at 3 a.m. tomorrow to go on this mission trip. And this morning I woke up feeling nervous in a way that I really haven't felt, in any of the months leading up to this. I just now felt that feeling. And I think that is the enemy trying to come after me, trying to make me pull out of this, trying to tell me that it's better for me to stay in my comfort zone. The enemy wants us to stay comfortable, but God wants us to be uncomfortable so that we can see the fruit that grows from that. When we plant these roots of doing things uncomfortably, we get to see the flowers that bloom from it. We get to see the benefits that we get to experience, but also the people around us get to experience when we do hard things. It's important. And it is that deep. The last kind of area I wanted to talk about with doing uncomfortable things in my own life is college. Now, I still have a year until I go to college. Here's my dog, and so I'm not going to say that I just know everything about college or what I'm going to experience in college. But what I do know is that I am a little bit scared. I am, nervous. It's scary knowing that I'm not going to be going to a college in Texas where I live right now. I'm going to a different state. I'm going to be going farther than I've ever been from my family, and it's not just a trip. I'm going to live there for probably 4 years, and even after college, I don't know. Maybe I'll live there when I'm older as well. It's like there's this unknown, and it's hard and it's uncomfortable and it's scary. It's scary to not know what it's going to be like when I'm in college on my own, not living with my family. It's scary, but I think that it's necessary for me to go so that I can see how to live on my own, so I can see what I want for my life. Those uncomfortable things are going to grow me. They're going to push me beyond my limits. They're going to make me work hard for myself. I'm going to have to learn to be there for myself when times are hard in college. And of course, I can still call my parents, I can call my siblings, things like that. I can visit, but I won't have them just a door away anymore. I'm going to have to be there for myself, and I'm going to have to get uncomfortable. I'm going to have to put myself out there and make new friends. My friends from high school are not all going to Arkansas. They're not all going to places near me. It's scary. The unknown is scary, but I believe that God has so much in store for me, and I trust him with that. And I think that's the reason why I'm able to do hard things and push myself, because I trust that God has a plan with it. And I trust that he has something so much better than I could ever imagine for myself. I'm imagining a great college experience. I'm imagining so many blessings, but I know that God can do abundantly more than I can even plan. And it's probably much different than I planned, but I know that it's also much better than I could even imagine, because that's who God is. That's who he has been for me in the past, and that's who he will be forever. God is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. So just remember that when you're in a hard time and you feel uncertain about, where you're going to be in 10 years, where you're going to be tomorrow, like, just know God has a plan for you. And we might not know the rest of our story. We might not know the next chapter in our lives, but we do know the author of this whole book of life. Like, your book is written by a good author, so trust that. And I have to tell myself that. I have to tell myself that too, because there are moments when my trust begins to waver. Because as humans, we just doubt things, and I feel like God isn't with me, but I'm proven wrong every single time because God shows up. And I believe that anyone who's going through a hard season in their life right now, anyone who's going through a season of fear, uncertainty, anything like that, I believe that God will show up, and I believe that he can do so much more with your life than you can even begin to imagine. And the same thing for me. And I believe that with this podcast, like, even the podcast is something so uncomfortable for me. It's kind of weird talking to just a camera. I don't have anyone talking with me. Of course, if I continue to do guest episodes, then I will have someone talking with me. But ultimately, we're talking to a camera for people to listen. It's something that it's weird and it's uncomfortable, but if one person was helped by it, it would all be worth it for me. I just want to help people. I want to share my experiences, and I want to see the fruit of that. Every uncomfortable thing we do when we're pushing ourselves, there's always a reward at the end. And the reward may not be what you want it to be, honestly, but there always is a reward. Even if that reward is just learning what you don't want. Maybe I go to a college and I hate it there. It's uncomfortable, but ultimately I would still learn something about myself. I would still learn what I don't want for my life. I would still learn so many things, and, maybe it's not what I wanted, but God will give us what we need. Yeah, I just encourage you to expand your limits, push beyond what you think you're capable of, and push beyond your comfort zone. God uses these opportunities to make you so much better, to expand the kingdom of God. He uses you when you listen to him and you do those uncomfortable things, when you do the hard things. In the Bible, there are so many examples of this. Even in one of the most well-known Bible stories of all time, David and Goliath. David obviously was uncomfortable. He's facing a giant, but he had God on his side, and that's why he was able to do it. That's why he was able to do something so uncomfortable and so scary. I'm sure he was scared. He's this tiny person going against a giant, but God was with him, and God is with you. You can do hard things. God can use an ordinary person to do extraordinary things. I believe that. And I believe that he can use you and me, ordinary people, to do amazing things if we just listen to him and we just take time to do the things, even if they're uncomfortable. There are so many missed opportunities when we don't listen to God and he's talking to us, but we don't listen because we don't want to be uncomfortable, or we don't want to be embarrassed, or we're scared. But those are the things that are going to make the most impact on us and the people around us. So just keep living uncomfortably. I know, even just saying that, it's like, well, that's uncomfortable, but it's needed. You need to put yourself out there. You need to do hard things. It will be worth it. I promise you, God can use it. He has time and time again. And I believe that even right now, as you're listening to this episode, I believe that he is going to be working in my life in the Dominican Republic. I believe that he is going to put me in uncomfortable situations. Even going to another country and them speaking a different language. They speak Spanish there. I know a little bit of Spanish, but I'm not fluent. That's uncomfortable. And I believe God is going to put me in uncomfortable situations there. But I also believe that God is going to use those situations to expand my perspective, to expand their perspectives. And I believe those experiences have the opportunity to change lives, mine and theirs. And I was changed last year. I got to see things that I had never seen before. And this year, I know it's going to be the same. And maybe even greater. I might have my life changed even more than last year. Who knows? I have no idea what God has in store, but I do know that he has something good for me, because everything God does is for the good of those who love him. Everything he does. I know he has good plans for me, and he has good plans for you, so don't doubt it. He's in control. Let him be in control. Let him work in your life. With that being said, I think that is all I have to say. I hope as you go through this week, you can just, first of all, acknowledge the things in your life that have made you uncomfortable, but you've done them anyways. Give yourself a pat on the back for those things. That's amazing that you're doing things that are uncomfortable. But then also look at other areas in your life where you could be more uncomfortable. You could put yourself out there more, Talk to that person who doesn't have friends. Maybe they could be your best friend in a year, you never know. So just put yourself out there. Do it anyways. Do it scared. Don't let your mind hold you back. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. Please follow if you aren't already, and share this episode with anyone who you feel like would need it. And I will see you guys in the next episode. That's the scoop.